Alrighty, so we have Miss Victoria, the podcast producer here. Hi, friend.
Girl.
So we are going to be talking about everything podcasting. And guys, I'm so excited to have this conversation today because it's like my partner in crime right here. Like we've done a lot of projects together. And yeah, she's just a wealth of knowledge. So let's get started. Could you introduce yourself and basically how did you get started with becoming a podcast producer?
Yes. So, hey everyone, I'm so honored to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. A little bit about me. I am a podcast producer, so I help women in business to be able to sell their services through podcasting. I am on a mission to solve the content problem. So for everyone who's overwhelmed with content and feels like it's just way too much to keep up with, I have found that podcasting is a solution. And so I like to help women to be able to market their business with ease using podcasting. And then I guess you asked about how I got started with that.
Yeah, how did you get started?
Yes. So 4 years ago, I was really on a journey. Post grad, I was a couple of years out and I was trying to figure out my life, right? What's the next step? They give you a piece of paper and they say, now you are responsible for your life.
Yeah, that's about right.
It was so overwhelming. And there were so many emotions that I wasn't prepared for, right? The grief of who I was post grad, who I was going into college and just finding my identity, returning home. And so I felt very lost and lonely. And for me, I was like, I feel like there's other people that feel this way. And so I started my podcast as a way to share my story and shine the light on the fact that having the blues post grad is normal. And so I wanted to normalize the fact that many of us are figuring it out and we don't all know what our next steps are. And so that's how I started my own podcast. And then now, fast forward, I found that that journey was so healing and therapeutic for me. I'm like, I feel like there are other women who have amazing stories to tell that the world needs to hear, and that if someone else heard it, it could liberate them. And that's kind of what got me into helping other people own their voice through podcasting.
That is amazing. All right, so could you walk us through the basic steps of starting a podcast?
Ooh, yes. Okay, so the first thing is really figuring out what is it that you want to talk about. And for me, when I work with clients, it starts with their GPS. So the GPS, I love that visual image because one, whenever we end up getting distracted or any detours, we can reroute ourselves using this GPS. It helps us stay focused. So the first thing is identifying your goal. Like, why is it that you want to start a podcast? What's the impact that you hope to have as a result of sharing your message? And then getting really clear on the purpose, right? And so the purpose is, once this message is out here, what do I want the result to be in the lives of my listeners? Because when you share your story and use your voice, you inevitably liberate and impact and influence other people. And so that's a really great responsibility. And so we want to take care with that process. And then figuring out your people. So who is it that you want to impact with your message? And then figuring out your strategy in terms of how are you getting the word out there with your podcast content. So that's the starting point that I take a lot of clients down, because clarity is everything, especially in this game where consistency is key.
Alrighty, and like with your podcast, what equipment did you use to get started? And then like what type of equipment do you recommend your clients use to get started?
Okay, so I literally started with my iPhone. And
Nice.
I like saying that and sharing it because a lot of times where I see people getting stuck and not starting is they're like, well, I'm waiting until I get the fancy setup, because we're comparing our chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 30. You know, we're seeing the studios, the lights, camera, action, and it's like, well, I guess I need that in order to get started. And absolutely not. Perfection is not a prerequisite for impact. I started with my iPhone. I had an impact with my iPhone. I grew my audience with an iPhone. And so I like to really encourage my clients to start simple, because when you start simple, you're less likely to give up. And because sometimes when we overcomplicate it, we end up delaying and procrastinating. So starting simple.
Yes, especially when you're creating content at scales, guys, like just use the easiest thing to get started. Like right now, even with live streaming, I'm using my laptop. I don't have a laptop and a ring light. I don't have my microphone set up. I don't have my webcam. I have the equipment to do it, but I just rather not. All right. So, how important is it to choose a specific niche when you're starting a podcast? Like, do you think that's important? Is that something that you really need to do?
I love this question because a lot of times we narrow our niche to what we do, but who we are is very complex, it's very layered. And so I think it's important to understand the niche is you. You are the niche. And so you can share your personal, you can share your business, all of you should be brought to the table because in actuality, what's going to attract your most aligned audience is your authenticity. Your story is the secret to you standing out in a saturated market. Who you are and your unique quirks is what's going to allow people to say, oh my goodness, that's the person that I love following, I relate to, I engage, they're engaging with because they're connected to you as a person. So I think that you have to define the niche as who you are and get clear on what you bring to the table.
Yeah, and could you sort of like explain the process of going through like scripting and outlining a podcast? Guys, you're gonna get a whole master class today, okay?
Yes. Okay. So a couple of years ago, I created this guide around figuring out your creative flow. Because oftentimes what happens is we end up trying to emulate what other people do. And then we end up frustrated, we end up procrastinating because we're out of alignment. And so your purpose was divinely designed for you and who you are as a person. It's like unique as a thumbprint, right? And so you have to figure out what works for you. So I find that some clients, they are really good at being spontaneous. I love being spontaneous. Okay. I will grab a phone and go live in a hot minute, no preparation, no notes, because that's me. I'm spontaneous. I'll get an idea and I just run with it. And so it would actually delay me to have to sit down and create an outline. And so if you're spontaneous, then being able to go with your natural flow when you feel inspired and just running with that natural energy. If you're someone who feels like you just want to be able to have a roadmap to where you need to go, then maybe just giving yourself bullet points and outlines. If you're someone where you're like, okay, I need the crutch, I need the safety of having a word for word script, then I would say leverage the script, but then utilize tools like a teleprompter so that way you can, look at the camera directly. You're not looking down at your notes and you still get that natural engaged energy without, feeling like people can see the notes and now it's awkward or you're not making eye contact. And then that's additional edits. So figuring out your flow is super key when it comes to figuring out what scripting looks like for you.
Yeah, I mean, when I first met Victoria and I just saw the way she did things, I honestly, as a person who likes to plan everything, I was I was in awe, and I was also like baffled. I was like, how did she do that? Like, I still ask myself that question. I'm like, and guys, she's over there killing it on Instagram, posting I don't even know how many times a day, like, and it's all spontaneous, like it's not planned, like you said, and I think that's like really cool.
I appreciate you saying that. Like, that means a lot. I will say there's a shadow side to every strength. And so I want to be real with that because the reality is, while I'm really good at being spontaneous, I can't go back and structure myself afterwards. Meaning, an example of that is once I go live, I can't really go back and remember what I said word for word and then create a caption. So there's a shadow side to every strength. And so that's why it's important to know your flow, know your gifts, and know the gaps, because then you can leverage tools and technology to fill in those gaps. So I'll use like AI tools in order to like just upload my videos and get the transcript and have things like ChatGPT create that outline so they can structure it and I can stay in my zone of genius. So that's the beauty of being able to figure out your flow.
So, what is some of your favorite AI tools to help you with podcasting?
I love this question. Okay, because one, I'm a tech girly. Okay, so I am still, even though I have like a whole business, y'all, I still got that corporate job. So over there, that's where the tech stuff happens. So for me, when it comes to podcasting on my end, something that I utilize is a tool called Capwing. So Kapwing. And this is how I'm able to repurpose the podcast episodes and literally leverage them as a content bank. So one of the reasons why I prefer podcasting as my priority marketing platform for my clients is because it allows them to be able to be highly visible without the overwhelm. Because you take that one podcast episode and that can literally become 12 reels, which is enough for 3 times a week for 1 month, right? You can take that and then turn it into clips for Facebook and YouTube shorts and all the things. And then you can take the transcript from that same tool I mentioned and put it into ChatGPT and say, turn this into blog posts, turn this into emails. And so now it's your words, it's your messaging, but it just has multiple formats. So this is how you're able to save your time, your energy, because that's precious.
All right, so we have a question here from the audience. What would you recommend someone do as their first step to start their podcast? So what's the first step?
Yes, I love this. First, something we mentioned earlier, which is discover your GPS. So you want to be clear on what's your goal for getting started, because the truth of the matter is you're going to have a lot of opportunities arise as you grow and figure things out. And so you want to know your why so you're not distracted by all the shiny object syndrome, right? So why do you want to start a podcast? And then you want to be clear on who is it that you want to reach with your message. And then that's where you begin to develop a strategy in terms of what content you should put out. So something that I have my clients do, which saves them a lot of time and energy, is to be able to audit their existing content for what's the most highest performing, because that's what your audience that you currently have already loves. And likely the reason they love it is because it answers something that they're either curious about or confused about, right? And which means, ding, 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 this is what they're searching online for answers to. And so, in order for your podcast to be highly searchable, I recommend you answer questions that are already existing in your audience. And you'll find those answers in your analytics. So, what's already high performing in terms of your current content?
Alrighty, and speaking of promoting, like, how do you recommend people promote their podcast? Like, what type of strategies are there out there to start promoting your podcast and to start like repurposing them?
Yes. These are such great questions. Oh my
Thank you
goodness.
so much.
So one, you need to be able to leverage tools, like I mentioned, the Capwing tool, to be able to just cut it up into your already existing platforms. But here's where a lot of people make a big mistakes, which stunts their growth and leaves them frustrated in the journey of podcasting, is they skipped over the GPS, right? So
Yeah.
they're not clear on their goal. And so therefore all they're doing is copying what they see everyone else doing. But can I tell you this? The S part of that framework is really key, because their strategy is based on their goal. So you have to have your own unique strategy. And so if your goal, for example, is to be able to grow your email list, then when you are posting the videos from your podcast on all of your platforms, you're not telling people, hey, go listen to my podcast.
Yeah.
No, because your goal is not to grow your podcast listeners. Your podcast is there to help you grow your email list, right? What's your big goal? And so your call to action will be redirecting them to whatever is going to get them on that email list, whatever your lead magnet is or your freebie and things like that. So that's a big thing when it comes to promotion, where a lot of people have a misstep, is they end up copying and pasting everybody else's strategy because they haven't defined their goals.
Yeah, I mentioned this a lot of times with my clients as well, because they're mainly business owners, especially with getting on YouTube. It's like sometimes, content creator basis like versus like business owner, right? So what type of call to action should we be doing? Are we here to sort of like be playful, or are we sort of here to make money? So it just honestly, it depends on your goals. So another question that we have is, there are so many platforms. So should be YouTube? Should you put on an actual podcast platform when you start? Like, it can be so overwhelming. How are we going to navigate that?
Yes, I love that you're acknowledging the overwhelm, because it's real, okay? Because every time we turn around, it feels like the analytics change. There's a new popular platform and all the things. And so that's why I always start with the goals, the GPS, because your goals will inform your strategy, which informs the steps that you're taking, the platforms you're choosing, and all the things. And so when you look at and the value of podcasting is that, again, you have a content bank to withdraw from. And so I want to break this down to make it make sense. So I'm taking 20 minutes to record one podcast episode, but I'm recording it as a video. That's going to give me the highest repurposing return on my investment, right, of time and energy. So I'm taking 20 minutes, I'm recording that podcast episode, and then I'm able to leverage AI tools to chop it up for any platform of my choice. And so now all I'm doing is recording that video and then taking 10 to 15 minutes to schedule that for an entire month. So that's going to really reduce the overwhelm. And I found that my clients feel like marketing is a lot less stressful and it feels a lot less, messy in terms of like, where do I start? When we start from just choosing that one primary platform and then repurposing from there.
Yeah. And about like posting, like what type of posting schedule do you usually recommend people start with? Like how many times a month do you recommend they post on their podcast?
Love this question. And one thing you'll find with me is I am not a one size fits all person. Okay. I don't believe in it. I think you should really be realistic with where you can start. And so the reason why this works, even with podcasting, is because you're able to repurpose it, which means you have multiple touch points. So a lot of times we feel guilty when we are, okay, I'm posting one time on Instagram and that's it. And then we're like, well, now I feel like I'm ghosting my audience. And then I'm coming back and asking them for money, but I haven't talked to them all month, which again makes sense because marketing is a relationship. So the feelings that you have about ghosting your audience is it's natural. However, podcasting solves that problem because my goal if your goal with podcasting is to be able to monetize it by selling your services, you're not abandoning your audience by posting once a month because they're able to have multiple touch points with you because you're chopping up that content and now you're engaging with them, let's say 3 times a week on Instagram through these reels, right? And then you're also engaging with your VIPs, your very interested people in your email list 4 times a month, right? Once a week, they're getting an email from you. And so you have multiple touch points. And so it takes the burden off of, oh my goodness, I have to do so much when it comes to marketing.
Yeah, I remember when I had a podcast and I literally just wanted to drive traffic to my website. And this was only about a year and a half ago. So I would literally chop like 2 to 3 clips up every single podcast. And then also like that reminder graphic, like, hey, new episode. And that promoted the podcast itself. Like I was consistently gaining new viewers. And yeah, that's actually how we met. So I posted and like she was like, wow, can we talk about this? And I was like, sure. Okay, another question. Do I need to post the reels on all platforms by using each app? Is there a way we can post videos in multiple places at one time? It gives me a headache thinking about posting on 5 different areas.
Yes, that's such a good question. And so, one thing you'll learn about me is I am all about efficiency. Okay. I'm not here to waste time. And so, that is literally how I coach my clients. When I'm talking through a goal, I'm like, okay, so what's the most efficient way we get this done? And so, when it comes to your content, I believe you should be scheduling. And so, one of the like scheduling cadences that I wrote out for a client a couple of weeks ago was spend 20 minutes on, let's just say, a Monday recording the podcast episode. All right, I done did my thing for the day. 20 minutes done, right? And then you take the next day, let's say that's Tuesday, and then you sit down and you input that into the AI tool to chop that up. They're doing the work. You're not doing the work. The video has now been chopped up. Okay, now you have 12 reels that are all ready and set to go. And then maybe that day, if you're feeling energized, you can then schedule them, right? And scheduling can take, like, let's just say 15 to 20 minutes, depending on if you have to write a caption and all the things. And now, Monday, Tuesday, guess what? You're done. And you're not done for the week, you're done for the month because one podcast episode can literally complete your content calendar for the month. So I think this is one of the things that allows us to not feel the frustration and overwhelm because it's really real. But 9 times out of 10, it's because we don't have a system to support the goal.
Yeah. I hate scheduling so much. All right. How can podcasters effectively tell their personal stories or the stories of others?
You know, I love this question. I love storytelling. Oh.
I know.
Okay, so there is a framework that I walk my clients through inside of my program. And so, because one of the things is with storytelling, there are a couple of things that we do which makes it feel awkward. right? So if we stay in the struggle place a little bit too long, and that means all we're talking about is what went wrong and how life was hard. And so while your audience may relate to that, they're not moved to trust you as an expert or to invest money in you, because now it sounds like we're at the same place. Um, and so you have to talk about the struggle, but you, in order to relate to where they are now, but you also have to move and transition them to understanding the connection between where you were, what you went through, and what you do now, right? The expertise you currently have. And so this is really important because this gets you out the friend zone. And you know you're in the friend zone when everybody is liking, they're even commenting, and maybe they're even sharing it, but ain't nobody buying. Okay. And so that means you may have to do a little bit more work in terms of the credibility establishment. So your story should talk about the struggle. It should talk about your searching journey. It should talk about, which the searching journey is, what did you try before you figured out what really worked? And the beauty of this and how this helps you to be able to position yourself as an expert and sell with ease is you're handling objections. Because 9 times out of 10, your current audience is thinking about, do I really need to work with her as a coach? Because I could just get this little ebook over, right? And so in your story, you're talking about how you tried this and you tried that, and they're like, oh, that didn't really work for me either. Yeah, okay. And that's why that didn't work. And now, so you're taking them on a journey, right? And then you talk about the shift. So what changed? Oftentimes it's something that changes in our mindset, our momentum, right? We may have decided to take action in a different way, and so that sparks something. Or sometimes it's our money. Okay, financially we got in a different position, and then we were able to make a shift. And then you talk about your solution. So what are you doing now that is working, right? What's your framework, your methodology that you discovered through that story journey, that led you to where you are now, and that's getting you results for your clients? And this, on the flip side, is also the framework that you utilize when you're interviewing your clients on your podcast, when you're interviewing guests on your podcast. You are walking through their story, highlighting the shift, the search, the struggle, and the solution as well.
Wow, I feel like that was such a gem right there. You just completely explained like the storytelling aspect. Okay, so how do you handle sort of like the technical challenging in podcasting? Like what, I know you said that you use your phone, but like what software and tools do you recommend?
Yes. So everybody's setup is different. For me, I like to make sure that I'm helping my clients to maximize what they already have. Again, the more barriers there are, the more we're complicating it, the less likely we are to do something. So if we're like, okay, I need to go buy all this fancy stuff, well, now I'm going to have another excuse because that money was already for something else. So I'm going to just wait until maybe my paycheck in September. And then, so it's like, I like to make sure that it's as simple as possible. So I use what clients already have. For instance, I was on a call with a client a couple of days ago, and we were talking about their in-home studio setup, and I was like, girl, your camera is crystal clear. Okay. Are you on your desktop? All right, cool. Well, this is what we're gonna be using for you recording. Okay. Because you don't need to go buy anything else. You need to use what you already have. Plus, you're already comfortable recording this way because we're on Zoom weekly. So let's use what you have. And so I just advised her to use her Zoom, and then take the video and upload it into Kapwing and just chop it up, because simple, easy, her quality was already seamless. So using what you have is the best method.
Okay, and I know you mentioned Kapwing, but is there any other tools or software that you recommend for editing podcasts?
That's really the tool that I use. I'm literally obsessed with that thing. I use it for everything.
I've
Yeah.
actually never heard of Kapwings. I feel like I'm saying it so wrong. So that's
You're advanced, okay? It's the editing for people who don't edit, okay?
okay.
Yeah, you're advanced. You got degrees behind your name when it comes to editing, okay?
All right. So could you share some examples of podcasts that you think are like really well produced or inspiring?
Ooh, I was just this is good. I know people's name. I don't necessarily remember the name of their podcast, so I'm gonna say what I remember. Okay. I was just listening to Donnie Wiggins' podcast. Actually, I think I remember the name of hers. Full Transparency.
Oh,
Very
yeah.
good.
Like we were talking about this the other day.
love her podcast, especially the episodes where she's doing live coaching. Those are so good. One, I feel like she's talking to me. And so I'm like, ooh, let me get my life together. Yeah, I think hers is the content is just very, it's full of substance, right? You walk away with a mindset shift and some mini win that allows you to be better positioned. And it's also in my mind, because I'm over here like, well, let me join her program. Because if I'm getting this level of transformation right now on this podcast, imagine if I could be in her community. And that's what you want to happen. You want to have your content so strategically laid out that people are convincing themselves they need to pay you. That's what's happening every time I tune into her podcast. Yeah.
Okay, so in terms of like engagement and sort of like having that feeling that you're talking about, what do you recommend podcasters do to sort of like get their audience engaged and connected to them?
That's a really great question. So I think that one, you need to answer questions that people are actually asking.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we are literally randomly creating content and they're wondering why it's not sticking. And so we have to let the data help us make decisions, which is why I recommend before you get started doing an audit on your current content to see what's performing well. And even if you're not super active on social media, if you've been in business for any number of years, you've probably done like workshops or talks. And so you want to, that all counts as content. Sometimes we think it's just social media. And so auditing all of your content, looking at your client conversations and really seeing like what questions are they asking, what's fuzzy for them. And that's where you start with your content. So your content becomes engaging and people lean in and they listen when you are actually talking about something that connects to where they are right now.
Alrighty, and as a podcast producer, what are some of the main things that you see that holds people back from actually starting their podcast?
Fear. It's fear. I was literally just talking about this yesterday. I was like, you do not need more clarity, because that's what people are always telling me. They're like, well, I'm going to be ready once I get more clarity. And I'm like, girl, you don't need more clarity, okay? Because if you can answer what's my goal, who are the people, what's the purpose, you know what you need. Because at the end of the day, you have to understand where the gap is. So even though sometimes we know what we're supposed to be talking about, we may not know how to structure it or how to get the technology set up. Then cool, that's where you invest. But you're clear on what you need to be doing, what you need to talk about, and what your impact goal is. You just need to figure out the technicalities, which oftentimes, if that's a knowledge gap, then that's going to cause lead to you making an investment so you can get access to that information. And so I think a lot of times we say that we are unclear when really we lack courage. And so we need to be courageous enough to be able to lean into being on a new platform, trying something new. Because if what's working isn't working, or what we're trying isn't working, then it's time to do something new. Because I don't know about you, but I don't have time to waste when I could be making an impact, because there are lives at stake. For me, I see my business as a purpose, which means that it's called to pour into people, to impact people, transform them, take them to their next chapter that they need to be in order to thrive. And I can't let that be on pause while I'm letting fear stop me.
Dang. I'm gonna need to chop these live streams up and like make a compilation or something. Okay, so what advice do you have for someone who feels nervous or unsure about starting their podcast?
Yes. Well, one, I would say you have to really understand that perfection is not a prerequisite for impact. And so a lot of times we hold ourselves to an unrealistic standard of, well, I'm going to start once I have everything in order. Life is never all in order. Like, even when you get one part of life in order, then the other part just starts having chaos. And so it's like literally you have to be more committed to the calling than you are how people perceive you. Because what's underneath wanting things perfect is overly overly focused on other people's perception of us, which we can't control anyway. So it's like we have to be more committed to our calling than we are having people think that we're, think a certain way of us. That's the first thing, perfection, like letting that thing go. The other thing is understanding that there's value to your voice. And so you have to understand that the message that you have in your heart that you're feeling called to share is literally going to transform someone's life. And so that has to be a priority. When we make it so much about ourselves, one of my friends said this the other day on a live conversation. She was like, when she stopped making her podcast about herself, it became a lot easier to be consistent.
Yes, make it about the viewers. Got it. Okay, so I feel like you're flying through these questions super quickly. So I think I have one last question. And if you guys have any questions, please comment them in the comments and she will answer them. But what trends do you see in the podcasting industry? And how can new podcasters stay ahead of the curve?
Well, let me say this. Unpopular opinion. Stop trying to be ahead of the curve. Okay? Where you are is great. Where you are is great. When we get so caught up in trying to emulate, we stop trying to imagine. When you get caught up in trying to emulate, you stop imagining. And so you can't be so caught up in someone else's calling, the vision on their life, their strategy, that you're not receiving divine downloads about where you're supposed to be, because that's a distraction. And so I think I know I've said this a lot, but it's because this is the foundational thing that I think a lot of people skip over, which leads to the overwhelm and the frustration and the giving up. And I'm going to throw this whole podcast away. Okay. And this is because we do not have our GPS. So you have to have your goals, your purpose, your people, your strategy, and let that be the guiding force for the decisions you're making, the directions that you're taking, and where you see yourself heading. Because everybody else, they're on their own course of purpose, but you have to know you were called to this thing, which means there's a plan for you.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. We have a comment here. It says, hello, ladies. I can't stay for this live. I want you to know I value this conversation. Looking forward to the replay. I'm excited for you to see it too. Someone else said, dang. Sorry, guys. So you have a free gift for our audience. What is it?
Yes. Now I'm trying to remember what it was.
I think it was a planner.
Okay, thank you.
It's down below in the comments, guys, but she's going to tell you.
Yes. So I have designed this planner that walks you through the 7 steps of how to get started with your podcast. And I love this because everything that we talked about today, you get access to. So in terms of how do I audit my content to figure out what's actually performing well, I walk you through that inside of this planner. What am I supposed to talk about? I walk you through how to script out your episodes. And even there's inside of the planner a promotion plan for how do you get the word out about your listener, about the podcast and get people to listen and pay attention. Choosing the right platform. All of that is answered inside of this guide. And so you can check out the link below in order to get access to this planner. Yeah.
Yeah, this live was great. I want to thank everybody who stayed the whole time. There was a few people that actually stayed the whole time during the live. Thank you so much. And yeah, I'll see you guys tomorrow. Bye.